The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when the distress signal played across the main screen. Ambassador Thrix of the Veloran Empire watched with his 3 eyes as the flickering image showed a small colony world burning under orbital bombardment. The Kreth Dominion had finally made their move. "The human colony on Proxima 7 is under attack," announced the council speaker, a tall insectoid being named Chitter. "Preliminary reports suggest a Kreth invasion fleet of over 200 warships. The colony has a population of 50,000 civilians." Murmurs spread through the assembled delegates. 200 warships was enough to conquer most civilized worlds in the galaxy. The Kreth were known for their brutal efficiency and their complete lack of mercy. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. Ambassador Thrix leaned toward his aide. "The humans will abandon the colony," he whispered. "No species would be foolish enough to challenge such numbers. Their nearest military base is 3 days away at maximum speed. By then, everyone will be dead." His aide nodded in agreement. It was simple mathematics. The humans had impressive military technology, but they were still a young species in galactic terms. They had joined the Council only 50 years ago, and while they had proven themselves capable traders and colonizers, they had not yet faced a true test of their military strength. The human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Chen, stood up from her seat. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something that Thrix could not quite identify. It was not fear. It was not despair. If anything, it looked almost like anticipation. "I have already contacted Terran Command," Ambassador Chen said. "A Marine strike force is being deployed immediately." The council chamber erupted in confused chatter. A strike force against 200 warships. "Ambassador Chen," the speaker said carefully, "perhaps you do not understand the situation. The Kreth have brought enough firepower to devastate an entire solar system. A strike force will accomplish nothing except adding to the death toll." Ambassador Chen smiled. It was not a comforting smile. "Speaker, with respect, you do not understand our Marines. They are not being sent to die. They are being sent to win." Thrix felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were mad. They had to be mad. No sane species would send soldiers into such a hopeless situation and expect victory. 3 standard days later, the Terran marine transport ship, Defiant Promise, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima 7 system. On board were exactly 147 Marines under the command of Colonel James Ironheart Mitchell. Colonel Mitchell stood in the ship's briefing room, looking at the holographic display showing the enemy positions. 217 Kreth warships now orbited the planet. Ground forces had already landed. The colony's defensive shields were at 12% and failing. Civilian shelters were holding, but they would not last much longer. "Sir," his executive officer, Major Elena Rodriguez, said quietly, "Command is requesting confirmation of our engagement plan." Mitchell studied the display. 147 Marines against an army that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. 1 transport ship against over 200 warships. Any military textbook in the galaxy would call this situation impossible. He smiled. "Tell Command our plan is simple," Mitchell said. "We go down there and we take our people back." Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. She had served with Mitchell for 15 years. She had seen him lead Marines through situations that would have broken any other fighting force in the galaxy. She knew that look in his eyes. It was the look he got when the odds were against them. It was the look that meant the Kreth were in trouble. "All hands to battle stations," Mitchell announced over the ship's communication system. "We begin orbital insertion in 30 minutes. I want all squads briefed and ready. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. And remember this, those colonists down there are counting on us. We are not going to let them down." The Defiant Promise was not a combat vessel. It was a troop transport with minimal weapons and armor, but the humans had made modifications over the years. Hidden beneath its civilian appearance were systems that would have surprised any Kreth captain who bothered to scan properly. The ship began its approach, moving through the outer edge of the system at what appeared to be civilian speeds. The Kreth command ship detected them immediately and dispatched a patrol wing of 5 destroyers to investigate. "Contact in 10 minutes, the ship's tactical officer reported. 5 destroyers moving to intercept. Mitchell watched the approaching ships on the display. 5 destroyers against 1 transport. The Kreth commanders probably thought they were being generous. "Signal the lead ship," Mitchell ordered. "Standard civilian distress channel. Tell them we're a medical vessel responding to the colony's emergency beacon." The communications officer sent the message. The Kreth response came 30 seconds later. It was a single word in their harsh, clicking language: "Surrender." Mitchell smiled again. "No response. Maintain course and speed." The destroyers closed to weapons range. Their targeting systems locked onto the transport. The lead ship's commander must have been feeling very confident. 1 small transport against 5 warships. It would be over in seconds. The Kreth never saw it coming. At exactly 2,000 kilometers, the Defiant Promise's hidden systems came online. Electronic warfare pods that had been disguised as cargo containers erupted with signals powerful enough to blind every sensor system within 1,000,000 kilometers. Missile tubes concealed within the ship's hull opened and launched a spread of 12 Hellfire torpedoes, each one carrying enough explosive power to crack a small moon. The lead destroyer took 4 direct hits and vanished in a ball of expanding plasma. The second ship managed to raise its shields, but 2 torpedoes punched through anyway and tore its engineering section apart. The remaining 3 destroyers tried to scatter, but the Defiant Promise was already moving, its engines pushing well beyond civilian specifications. Major Rodriguez watched the battle unfold from her position in the command center. 2 down, 3 damaged and retreating. Enemy fleet is mobilizing response. Time to planetary insertion. 7 minutes at maximum burn. Mitchell nodded. "Take us in. All Marines prepare for hot drop." The Defiant Promise dove toward the planet's atmosphere at speeds that should have torn it apart. Its hull glowed red, then white, as friction heated the outer plating to thousands of degrees. The Kreth fleet was already responding, launching fighters and repositioning their capital ships to intercept. But they were too slow. The humans had calculated their approach perfectly. By the time the Kreth weapons could lock on, the transport was already entering the atmosphere, hidden by the interference of re-entry. Inside the ship, 147 Marines stood ready in their drop pods. Their powered armor was sealed and pressurized. Their weapons were loaded and primed. Each one of them knew the odds they were facing. Each one of them had volunteered for this mission anyway. That was what made them Terran Marines. The first pods launched while the ship was still screaming through the upper atmosphere. They fell like meteors, dozens of armored figures plunging toward the burning colony below. The Kreth ground forces looked up and saw what appeared to be a rain of fire descending upon them. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Colonel Mitchell's pod touched down in the center of the colony's main plaza. The impact crater was still smoking when he climbed out, his rifle already raised and scanning for targets. Around him, more pods were landing, Marines emerging and immediately taking defensive positions. A squad of Kreth warriors came around the corner of a damaged building, their weapons raised. They were tall creatures, nearly 3 meters of armored chitin and claws, evolved from predator species on their homeworld. They had conquered dozens of worlds and slaughtered millions of sentient beings. They lasted exactly 4 seconds against Colonel Mitchell and his Marines. The first wave of enemy soldiers fell before they could fire a single shot. Mitchell's rifle spoke in controlled bursts, each round finding its target with mechanical precision. The other Marines joined in, their coordinated fire creating an impenetrable wall of destruction. When the smoke cleared, 20 Kreth warriors lay dead on the ground. Not a single Marine had taken so much as a scratch. "First contact, zone secured," Mitchell reported over his communication link. "All squads advance to assigned objectives. Priority is civilian shelters. Find our people and get them out." Across the colony, similar scenes were playing out. Marines hit the ground fighting, their superior training and technology giving them an advantage that raw numbers could not overcome. The Kreth had expected to find terrified civilians and token resistance. Instead, they found the most elite fighting force humanity had ever produced. And those Marines had come to take their people home. The civilian shelter was located 3 kilometers from the main plaza, buried beneath what had once been the colony's administrative center. Now, the building above was nothing but rubble, but the shelter itself remained intact. Inside, over 2,000 colonists huddled in darkness, listening to the sounds of battle above them. Maria Santos held her daughter close, trying to keep the little girl calm. They had been in the shelter for 2 days now, ever since the first Kreth ships appeared in the sky. The power had failed 12 hours ago. The emergency lighting was fading. Food and water were running low. And everyone knew that it was only a matter of time before the Kreth found them. "Mommy," little Anna whispered, "are the monsters going to get us?" Maria wanted to lie. She wanted to promise her daughter that everything would be okay, but she had never lied to Anna, and she was not going to start now. "I don't know, baby," she said softly, "but I need you to be brave, okay? Can you do that for me?" Anna nodded, her small face determined. She was only 6 years old, but she understood more than Maria gave her credit for. The shelter's communication system crackled suddenly, making everyone jump. For a moment there was only static. Then a voice came through, clear and strong. "Attention Proxima 7 civilians. This is Colonel James Mitchell of the Terran Marine Corps. We are on the ground and engaging enemy forces. Remain in your shelters and prepare for evacuation. Help is here." The shelter erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, crying with relief. Maria felt tears streaming down her own face as she squeezed her daughter tight. "See, baby," she whispered, "the Marines came just like I told you they would." But even as hope filled the shelter, Maria knew the danger was not over. One message did not mean safety. The Marines were here, but so was an entire Kreth invasion force. The odds were still impossibly against them. She did not know that the Marines considered impossible odds to be a challenge, not a reason to retreat. Above the shelter, Sergeant First Class Thomas Kane led his squad through the ruins of the administrative district. They had dropped 2 kilometers north of the shelter's location and were fighting their way through heavy Kreth resistance. "Contact left," one of his Marines shouted, squad-sized element moving to flank. Kane shifted his position behind a collapsed wall and acquired targets. The Kreth were adapting, learning that direct assaults against the Marines were suicide. They were starting to use cover and coordinated movement. It did not matter. The Marines were better. "Suppressing fire," Kane ordered. "Williams' grenade launcher, put rounds on that building. Everyone else advance on my signal." The squad's weapons opened up, pouring fire into the enemy position. Explosions rocked the building the Kreth were using for cover. In the momentary confusion, Kane's Marines moved forward in pairs, each one covering the other. It was textbook urban combat, executed with the precision that came from thousands of hours of training. The Kreth were fierce warriors, but they fought as individuals. The Marines fought as a unit, each member knowing exactly where the others would be and what they would do. The engagement was over in less than 2 minutes. 15 Kreth dead, 0 Marine casualties. "Shelter entrance should be just ahead," Kane reported, moving to secure the perimeter. They found the shelter's emergency hatch buried under debris from the collapsed building. Kane set 2 Marines to clear the obstruction while the rest established a defensive perimeter. Enemy contacts were increasing. The Kreth had figured out what the Marines were doing, and they were not happy about it. "Multiple contacts incoming," the squad sensor specialist announced. "Looks like company strength, maybe 100 hostiles approaching from the east." Kane processed the information quickly. 10 Marines against 100 Kreth. The enemy had numbers, but the Marines had position and firepower. It would not be easy, but it could be done. "Hold this position," Kane said. "We don't leave until those civilians are safe." His squad responded with a simple "Yes, Sergeant." There was no fear in their voices, no hesitation. They were Terran Marines. This was what they did. The Kreth attack came like a wave, dozens of armored warriors charging across the open ground toward the Marine position. They expected the humans to break and run. They expected fear and panic and easy kills. They got none of those things. The Marines opened fire in controlled, overlapping fields of fire. Each weapon was positioned to cover a specific sector. Each Marine knew exactly where to shoot and when. The Kreth fell in rows, their superior numbers meaning nothing against the wall of plasma and projectiles that met them. But the Kreth were not stupid, and they were not cowards. They kept coming, wave after wave, willing to sacrifice dozens of their own to kill even one human. The pressure on Kane's squad was immense. "Running low on ammunition," one Marine reported. "Down to my last 2 magazines." "Same here," another added. Kane checked his own supplies. He had maybe 60 rounds left. At this rate, they would be empty in 2 minutes. "Close quarters," he ordered. "Fix bayonets. We hold this position no matter what." The Marines drew their combat knives and attached them to their rifles. It was an ancient weapon, one that most galactic species considered primitive and obsolete. But the humans had never stopped training with blades. They understood something that other species had forgotten. When the ammunition ran out, the fight was not over. It was just beginning. The Kreth broke through the first defensive line and found themselves face to face with humans who refused to die. Kane's blade found the throat of the first warrior to reach him. He kicked the body aside and spun to face the next. Around him, his Marines were doing the same, their knives flashing in the dim light. It was brutal. It was savage. It was exactly the kind of fight that Terran Marines were trained for. The Kreth, despite their size and strength, found themselves pushed back by enemies who simply would not stop fighting. Every Marine that went down took at least 3 warriors with them, and somehow, impossibly, the line held. When reinforcements finally arrived, Colonel Mitchell leading them personally, they found Kane's squad still standing. Bloody, exhausted, but still standing. The ground around them was covered with Kreth bodies. Over 70 enemy dead and only 2 Marines wounded. "Shelter's clear, sir," Kane reported, his voice hoarse. "Ready for evacuation." Mitchell looked at the carnage surrounding them and nodded. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. Get your people patched up. We still have a lot of work to do." Below them, the shelter hatch finally opened. Civilians began emerging, blinking in the harsh light of battle. They saw the Marines standing guard, saw the enemy bodies scattered everywhere, and understood. The Marines had come for them, and they had held the line. The battle for Proxima 7 had entered its second day when the Kreth High Commander finally understood the scope of his mistake. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing disbelief. 147 human soldiers had landed on the planet. By all logic, they should have been dead within the first hour. Instead, they were winning. "Report," the High Commander demanded. His tactical officer clicked nervously, a sign of extreme stress in their species. "We have lost over 3,000 ground troops. The humans have evacuated 2/3 of the civilian population to their transport ship. Our blocking forces have been unable to stop them." 3,000. The High Commander could not believe what he was hearing. Against less than 150 enemies. The humans fight. Differently, Commander. They do not retreat when outnumbered. They do not surrender when wounded. They simply continue fighting until they are dead or victorious. The tactical officer paused, and very few of them have died. The High Commander turned to look at the planet spinning below them. His fleet still controlled the space around it. His remaining ground forces still outnumbered the humans by a massive margin. Victory should have been simple. But nothing about fighting humans was simple. Concentrate all available forces on the remaining evacuation points, he ordered. I want those humans crushed. I do not care how many soldiers it takes. End this. On the planet's surface, Colonel Mitchell was coordinating the evacuation of the last major civilian shelter. It held over 12,000 colonists, more than a quarter of the planet's entire population. Getting them out was the priority. Enemy forces are massing to the south, Major Rodriguez reported. Looks like at least 10,000 troops supported by armor. Mitchell studied the tactical display. The Kreth were finally getting serious. 10,000 warriors was a significant force, even for the Marines. Add in armored vehicles and air support, and things were going to get very difficult. How long until the transport can take the last load? He asked. 2 hours minimum. The ship took damage during the last extraction. Engineering is working on repairs. 2 hours. Mitchell looked at his remaining Marines. He had lost 16 soldiers in the fighting so far, killed in action while protecting civilians. Another 20 were wounded but still combat effective. That left him with 111 Marines to hold off 10,000 Kreth for 2 hours. It was the kind of odds that would make any other military force in the galaxy retreat. It was the kind of situation that was supposed to be impossible. Mitchell smiled. Deploy our forces in defensive positions around the shelter entrance. I want overlapping fields of fire and prepared fallback positions. If they want these civilians, they're going to have to go through us. The Marines moved to their assigned positions with practiced efficiency. They dug in, set up weapons emplacements, and prepared kill zones. Every soldier knew what they were facing. Every soldier knew the odds. None of them complained. None of them hesitated. Private First Class David Chen took his position behind a makeshift barrier of rubble and vehicle wreckage. He was 19 years old, fresh out of training, and this was his first real combat deployment. The older Marines had taken him under their wing, teaching him the things that training could not. How to manage fear, how to stay focused when everything went wrong, how to keep fighting when your body wanted to give up. Scared? The Marine next to him asked. It was Corporal Lisa Yamamoto, a veteran of 3 campaigns. Terrified, David admitted. Yamamoto nodded. Good. Fear means you're paying attention. Just don't let it control you. Trust your training, trust your squad, and keep your head down. Have you ever seen odds this bad? Yamamoto laughed, but there was no humor in it. Once, on Kepler Station, we were outgunned 20-1, held that station for 6 days until reinforcements arrived. She checked her rifle and added, We're Marines. This is what we do. The first Kreth units appeared on the horizon 20 minutes later. They came in a massive formation, thousands of warriors marching in disciplined rows. Armored vehicles rolled alongside them, their weapons tracking back and forth. Overhead, fighter craft circled like predatory birds. It was an impressive display of military power. Any other species would have surrendered at the sight. The Marines just checked their weapons and waited. All units hold fire until my command, Mitchell ordered. Let them get close, make every shot count. The Kreth approached, confident in their numbers. Their commander had ordered them to crush the humans and prove that the Dominion could not be defied. They expected an easy victory. They got something very different. At exactly 800 meters, Mitchell gave the order to fire. Every Marine weapon opened up simultaneously, creating a wall of destruction that the Kreth front lines simply vanished into. Hundreds of warriors fell in the first seconds. Hundreds more fell in the seconds after that. But the Kreth kept coming. They stepped over their dead and continued advancing, their own weapons returning fire. Explosions rocked the Marine positions. Several soldiers went down. "Hold the line," Mitchell shouted. "Keep firing." The battle became a brutal test of will. The Marines had training and technology. The Kreth had numbers and determination. Neither side was willing to give ground. David Chen fired and fired and fired until his rifle overheated and he had to switch to his sidearm. He saw Kreth warriors fall, saw them get back up, saw them keep coming. He saw Marines die beside him, their bodies torn apart by enemy weapons. He saw things that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his life. And he kept fighting. The first hour was the worst. The Kreth threw everything they had at the Marine positions, attacking from multiple directions at once. The defensive perimeter shrank as soldiers fell and positions became untenable. Mitchell pulled his forces back, tightening the circle around the shelter entrance. "Transport reports 30 minutes until extraction," Rodriguez said. Her armor was scorched and her helmet was cracked, but she was still on her feet. "Can we hold?" Mitchell looked at what remained of his command. 63 Marines still standing, defending a position that should have required 10 times that number. The ground around them was carpeted with Kreth bodies. The enemy had lost thousands, but they still had thousands more. "We hold," Mitchell said simply. "No other option." The Kreth launched their final assault with everything they had left. Thousands of warriors charged the Marine positions while armored vehicles provided covering fire. Fighter craft made strafing runs, their weapons tearing up the ground. The Marines stood their ground. They fought with rifles, with pistols, with knives, with their bare hands when nothing else was available. They refused to retreat. They refused to surrender. They refused to die. When the transport finally landed and began loading civilians, the Marines were still fighting. When the last colonist was aboard, they were still fighting. When the order came to evacuate, they fell back in good order, covering each other, making the Kreth pay for every meter of ground. The last Marine onto the transport was Colonel Mitchell. He stood at the ramp as the ship lifted off, watching the Kreth army below. They had stopped advancing. They just stood there, watching the transport escape into orbit. They had tried everything. They had thrown 10,000 warriors against 147 Marines, and they had failed. "Casualties?" Mitchell asked quietly. 31 killed in action," Rodriguez replied. 22 wounded. The rest of us are still standing." Mitchell nodded slowly. 31 dead. 31 Marines who had given their lives to protect 50,000 civilians. It was a heavy price, but they had paid it willingly. "Get us out of here," he said. "Our people are safe. Mission accomplished." The Defiant promise climbed toward orbit, leaving the burning colony behind. The Kreth fleet moved to intercept, but they were too slow. The transport's modified engines pushed it to speeds that their warships could not match. By the time they reached optimal firing range, the human ship was already entering hyperspace. On the bridge of the Kreth flagship, the High Commander watched the transport escape and felt something he had never experienced before. It was not anger. It was not frustration. It was something closer to fear. 147 humans had challenged his entire invasion force. They had killed over 5,000 of his warriors. They had rescued 50,000 civilians from under his weapons, and they had escaped. "Sir," his tactical officer said hesitantly, "what do we report to High Command?" The High Commander was silent for a long moment. "How did you explain this? How did you report that a handful of humans had humiliated an entire invasion fleet?" "The truth," he finally said. "We report the truth, and we recommend that the Dominion reconsider any future operations against human worlds." His officers exchanged uncertain glances. The Dominion did not back down from anything. They were the strongest power in their region of the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species. But none of those species had Marines. The Galactic Council chamber was full to capacity when Ambassador Chen took the podium. Word of what had happened at Proxima 7 had spread throughout the civilized galaxy. Every species wanted to hear the details. Every species wanted to understand how the impossible had become possible. Distinguished members of the Council, Chen began, I am here to provide a report on the Proxima 7 incident and to address some of the questions that have been raised. The chamber was silent. Every eye, sensor, and receptor was focused on her. 3 standard days ago, 147 Terran Marines landed on Proxima 7 to evacuate 50,000 civilians from a Kreth invasion force. The Marines were outnumbered by a factor of nearly 700 to 1. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and facing an enemy that had never known defeat. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. 700 to 1. The odds were staggering. In 47 hours of continuous combat, those Marines killed over 5,000 enemy soldiers, destroyed dozens of vehicles and aircraft, and successfully evacuated every single civilian from the planet. Every single one. 50,000 men, women, and children are alive today because of their sacrifice. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Thrix felt his skin changing color in amazement, an involuntary reaction his species could not control. We lost 31 Marines in the operation, Chen continued. 31 brave soldiers who gave their lives so that others might live. Their names will be remembered. Their sacrifice will be honored. They died as they lived, fighting for their people. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as she could. Several of you have asked me how this was possible. How could so few soldiers accomplish so much against such overwhelming odds? The answer is simple. They are Terran Marines. They do not calculate odds the way other species do. They do not weigh the probability of victory against the certainty of defeat. They simply look at what needs to be done, and they do it. The Veloran ambassador raised his hand. Ambassador Chen, with respect, what you are describing defies all military logic. Every species in this council understands the mathematics of war. Numerical superiority wins battles. Overwhelming force wins wars. What your Marines did should have been impossible. Chen smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she first announced the rescue mission. Ambassador Thrix, you are correct that what our Marines did defies conventional military logic, but humans have never been particularly good at conventional thinking. We come from a world where we were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most dangerous. We survived because we refused to give up. We evolved to face impossible odds and find ways to overcome them. She activated a holographic display showing footage from the battle. The delegates watched in stunned silence as a handful of Marines held off wave after wave of Kreth attacks. Our Marines train for situations like this. They do not see overwhelming odds as a reason to retreat. They see it as a challenge. They see it as an opportunity to prove what humans can accomplish when they refuse to surrender. The footage showed Colonel Mitchell standing at the evacuation point, his armor damaged and his weapons nearly empty, still fighting as civilians boarded the transport behind him. That is Colonel James Mitchell. He has served in the Marine Corps for 23 years. He has been wounded 7 times. He has led Marines into combat on 4 different worlds. When he was told that Proxima 7 was facing an invasion force of 200 warships and hundreds of thousands of ground troops, do you know what he said? The chamber waited. He said finally, a real challenge. Silence filled the room. The delegates were trying to process what they were hearing. For most galactic species, war was about numbers and logistics and careful calculation. The idea that soldiers would willingly rush toward impossible odds, that they would see overwhelming enemies as a challenge, was fundamentally alien to their understanding. "I want to be clear about something," Chen continued. "Our Marines are not mindless warriors. They do not throw their lives away foolishly. Every decision, every tactic, every sacrifice is calculated to achieve the mission objective. They knew exactly what they were facing at Proxima 7. They knew the odds were against them, and they went anyway because 50,000 innocent lives were at stake." She turned to face the section of the chamber where the Kreth observer sat. The Dominion did not have full council membership, but they were allowed to send observers to certain sessions. The Kreth representative was trying to remain stoic, but there was something in its posture that suggested discomfort. "To the Kreth Dominion I have this message. Proxima 7 was a human colony. Those were human civilians, and you attacked them. We will not forget. We will not forgive. And if you ever threaten our people again, you will face Marines once more. Except next time we will not be sending 147. We will send all of them." The Kreth observer stood and left the chamber without a word. Its departure was noted by everyone present. Chen watched it go, then turned back to the assembly. "The Terran Federation wants peace. We have always wanted peace. We joined this council because we believe in cooperation and mutual benefit. But we will never abandon our people to hostile forces. We will never leave civilians to die because the odds are unfavorable. And we will never, ever stop fighting for what is right." She stepped back from the podium. "That is all I have to report. Thank you for your attention." The chamber remained silent for several seconds after she finished. Then, slowly, delegates began to react. Some spoke quietly with their aides. Others simply sat and processed what they had heard. A few applauded, though applause was not common in council sessions. Ambassador Thrix turned to his aide again. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we need to reconsider our assessments of human military capability." His aide nodded. "Agreed. Should I begin the revised analysis?" "Yes, and make sure to note one particular point. When calculating the probable outcome of any conflict with humans, do not rely on numerical superiority. It appears to mean nothing to them." In a private chamber adjacent to the main hall, the representatives of several major powers had gathered for an informal discussion. The Veloran Empire, the Zentari Coalition, the Morphean Collective, and half a dozen other species were all represented. "This changes everything," the Zentari representative said. "We have always assumed humans were a minor power, capable but limited. This suggests otherwise." "One battle does not make a galactic power," the Morphean representative countered. "The humans were lucky. The Kreth made mistakes. It will not happen again." "Will it not?" The Veloran representative shook his head. "I have studied the battle records in detail. The humans did not win through luck. They won through training, discipline, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Those are qualities that cannot be easily countered." "What do you suggest?" "I suggest we become much friendlier with the Terran Federation. I suggest we offer them trade agreements and defensive pacts. And I suggest we make absolutely certain that we never, ever give them a reason to send their Marines against us." There were murmurs of agreement around the room. The calculus of galactic politics had just shifted significantly, and every species present understood it. Humans were no longer a minor power to be ignored or dismissed. They were a force to be respected, and their Marines were a force to be feared. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima 7, a memorial ceremony was held on Earth to honor the 31 Marines who had given their lives in the rescue operation. The ceremony was broadcast throughout the Terran Federation and beyond, watched by billions of humans and millions of aliens who had become fascinated by the species that could produce such warriors. Colonel Mitchell stood at attention as the names were read aloud, each one followed by a moment of silence. 31 names, 31 soldiers who had fought beside him, 31 heroes who would never go home. When the ceremony was finished, He walked through the crowd of mourners and found himself face to face with Maria Santos and her daughter Anna, the same mother and child who had been in the shelter, waiting for rescue that should never have come. "Colonel Mitchell," Maria said, her eyes filling with tears, "I wanted to thank you for what you and your Marines did." Mitchell shook his head. "No thanks necessary, ma'am. We were just doing our job." "Your job was to die," Maria said quietly. "Everyone said so. The aliens said so. Even some of our own people said so. But you came anyway. You saved 50,000 lives against impossible odds. That deserves more than thanks." Little Anna tugged on Mitchell's hand. He knelt down to her level. "Are you a superhero?" she asked seriously. Mitchell smiled sadly. "No, sweetheart, I'm just a Marine. And so were the soldiers who died to save you and your mom. They're the real heroes." Anna considered this for a moment. Then she nodded with the certainty that only a child could have. "I'm going to be a Marine when I grow up, so I can save people too." Mitchell looked at Maria, who was crying openly now. Then he looked back at Anna. "You do that, little one. You study hard and train hard and never give up. And maybe someday you'll wear this uniform too." He stood and saluted the child, a formal gesture that surprised everyone watching. Anna attempted to salute back, her small hand pressed against her forehead. It was not a perfect salute, but it was perfect enough. Later that evening, Mitchell sat alone in his quarters, looking at the memorial plaque that listed the names of every Marine who had died under his command. Not just from Proxima 7, but from every mission he had led over his 23 years of service. There were too many names on that plaque. There were always too many names. But there would have been more if they had not fought. More dead civilians, more orphaned children, more worlds burned by enemies who showed no mercy. Every name on that plaque represented lives saved, innocence protected, evil stopped. That was what made it bearable. That was what made it worth it. His communication device chimed. He checked it and found a message from command. Another crisis developing. Another world threatened. Another impossible situation that required Marines. Mitchell read the briefing and started to plan. The odds were bad, as they always were. The enemy was strong, as they always were. Victory was uncertain, as it always was. But that had never stopped the Marines before. He put on his uniform, checked his equipment, and headed for the transport bay. Another mission awaited. Another challenge to overcome. Another opportunity to show the galaxy what Terran Marines could do. Because that was the truth that the galaxy was slowly learning. Terran Marines did not see impossible odds as a reason to retreat. They saw them as a challenge. They saw them as a test. They saw them as an opportunity to prove that nothing was truly impossible if you were willing to fight for it. The universe was vast and full of dangers. There were species that conquered and species that submitted. There were empires that rose and empires that fell. There were battles that were won and battles that were lost. But there was one constant that the galaxy was beginning to understand. Wherever humans went, wherever they built their homes and raised their children, wherever they planted their flag and called a world their own, the Marines would be there to protect them. Against any enemy, against any odds, against any threat that dared to challenge them. Because that was what Terran Marines did. And they would never stop.